They told me not to buy the butcher shop. The locals said it was cursed. The previous owner, Wallace Griggs, vanished overnight 20 years ago. One morning, the shop was open as usual. The next, Wallace was gone, his knives still on the table, a single handprint left in the freezer, pressed from the inside. But I don't believe in ghost stories. I saw potential, cheap property, vintage equipment, and a prime location. I bought it in cash, restored the tiles, polished the old cutting blocks, and opened Cutter's Pride. On my first day, the freezer door wouldn't open. The main walk-in, an old steel monster built into the back wall, had rusted shut. I had to pay a specialist to get it open. When they pried it loose, the smell that came out made 2 of the workers vomit. Inside there were old meat hooks, blackened with age. Scratches covered the walls, deep and frantic. The specialist looked pale and said, "Nothing should have been left in there." I bleached it twice, but that night I heard it. It came from the freezer. I stood outside, flashlight in hand. The door vibrated. Something dragged across the floor inside. I didn't open it. I went home and told myself it was just metal settling. The next morning I found the back door open. Inside the freezer, the hooks were swinging gently, like something had just stepped off them. I installed cameras. I set motion sensors. I even locked the freezer with a heavy chain. Still, the noise returned, louder each night. Thumps, scratches, moans. Once I heard muttering, a voice saying something over and over. The meat is never wasted. One morning, I reviewed the footage. At 3:11 a.m., the camera glitched. When it came back, something stood in front of the lens, tall, wet, and missing its face. Just skin, pulled taut where features should be. A butcher's apron soaked in blood. It didn't move, just breathed heavily. The next frame was static. That was the night I stopped sleeping. I called a priest. He blessed the freezer. He only lasted 2 minutes before he ran outside, shaking. "That place isn't haunted," he said. "It's fed." I tried to close the shop, but when I went in to grab my things, the lights cut out. The front door locked on its own. Then I heard footsteps, bare feet slapping on tile, coming closer. I grabbed my knife. Something whispered in my ear, "You're ready now." I turned, no one was there, but the smell of rot was overwhelming. Then the freezer opened, not creaked, not groaned. It opened, slowly, deliberately, like something was inviting me in. Inside, the lights were still on, and hanging from the ceiling was Wallace Griggs. Skin removed, eyes wide open, still breathing. He looked at me and mouthed, "Help me." I stumbled back. Then I saw the hooks, not just empty ones. Fresh meat, limbs, torsos, faces. All of them were alive, twitching, gasping, crying soundlessly. I tried to run, but something grabbed my ankle and pulled me inside. I remember hitting my head, the cold floor, screams, then blackness. I woke up in a hospital bed. A nurse told me I had a concussion. Said I was found lying in the alley behind my shop, covered in blood that wasn't mine. The police investigated, but the freezer was spotless. No bodies, no hooks, no trace of Wallace Griggs. Just cold air and empty walls. They ruled it a breakdown, stress, hallucination, lack of sleep. But I know what I saw. I closed the butcher shop, moved 3 states away, got a job in retail, tried to forget. But the dreams started again. The whispers, the hooks, the meat still breathing. Then last week I got a package, no return address. Just a plain brown box with grease stains on the corners. Inside was a vacuum-sealed cut of meat, perfectly trimmed, fresh, human. And underneath it, a butcher's apron. My name stitched across the front, Cutter's Pride. And now, every night I feel it calling me again. The hunger, the craving. I haven't slept in 3 days. My skin itches. My teeth ache. The meat locker didn't want me dead. It made me its successor. And somewhere, inside some walk-in freezer, someone else is screaming behind steel walls. Because now, I'm the one behind the door. And I've just reopened. When my sister died in that room, everyone called it an accident. They said it was the pills, or the grief from Mom's death, or maybe she finally lost the war she'd been fighting in her head. But I knew better. It was the mirror, the one in the sealed room upstairs, the room our family never opened. My mother always warned us, never go into the mirror room, never stand in front of it alone. Never speak your reflection's name. I thought it was just superstition, like don't break a mirror or don't walk under a ladder, but now she's gone. And my sister stood in front of that mirror the night she died. The room hadn't been touched in years. Dust lay over every surface. Cobwebs stretched across the arched ceiling like skin. And there, bolted into the far wall, was the mirror, tall, gothic, framed in twisted black iron. It didn't show my reflection at first, just fog, a kind of soft breathing mist swirling behind the glass. But then it started mimicking me just a moment late, like it was watching, not reflecting. I looked up old family journals, records, anything. I found a page in my mother's diary. Each generation must carry the mirror until it feeds. If we don't feed it, it takes what it wants. That's the pact. It made no sense until I went back to the room and saw my sister in the mirror. She stood behind the glass, pale, wide-eyed, lips trembling. She didn't move like a reflection. She just watched, then mouthed one word, "Help." I screamed, but when I looked again, she was gone. That night I dreamed of hands behind the mirror, fingers tapping, clawing, faces pressed against the inside of the glass, my face. I woke up to blood dripping from the ceiling. Upstairs the mirror was leaking, a slow ooze of dark, thick liquid pooling onto the floor. Something inside it was alive. I begged my aunt to tell me the truth. She cried, told me the mirror came from Romania, gifted to our great-grandmother in 1902 by a man with no shadow. A devil's gift, he called it. It trapped things, souls, reflections, but only if fed once a generation. The last time it was fed was 40 years ago. That's why it took my sister. There was only one way to save her, one way to feed it willingly, to balance the pact, without letting it devour the entire family. A sacrifice, a soul for a soul. I went to the mirror room that night, lit candles in the 4 corners, just like the diary described. I wore my sister's necklace, held the family dagger in my right hand, and whispered the name I hadn't said in 10 years, Lena. The mirror responded instantly. The glass cracked, not shattered, but split open like skin. Behind it, a dark hallway spiraled inward, lined with screaming reflections. Lena stood in the center, her eyes wide, still whispering, "Help me." She reached toward me, but the mirror wouldn't let her pass, until I said the words, "Take me instead." The moment I spoke, it started. Every candle went out. The wind roared in from nowhere, and 100 hands pulled me in. I didn't scream. I looked into my sister's eyes, smiled, and pushed her out through the mirror. She collapsed on the floor of the room, crying, coughing, alive. I watched her crawl away, and then the mirror sealed shut. Now I'm here, on the other side, with the others. We live in the cracks, in the corners of glass, in the places where reflections blink too late. We are the watchers now, and we wait. Because someday, someone else will stand in front of the mirror, and if they speak my name, I'll be the one whispering, "Help." Helen Marks wasn't the kind of woman who frightened easily. She had spent 3 decades as a social worker in Wisconsin's foster care system, witnessing horrors most people couldn't imagine: bruised children, empty refrigerators, nightmares that wore human faces. She thought she'd grown immune, hardened. That was before the package arrived. It came on a Wednesday morning, left on her porch without a sound. The box was small, wrapped in plain brown paper, her name scribbled in red ink that had bled into the cardboard. There was no return address, no sender. Inside the package was a single item, a handmade rag doll, roughly stitched from ash-colored fabric, with fraying seams and limbs that bent awkwardly. Its eyes were mismatched black buttons, its mouth sewn into a too-wide smile with thick, uneven thread. It wore a miniature burlap dress, and faintly sewn into the hem were dried marigold petals, yellowed and brittle. No note, no explanation. Helen assumed it was from one of her former cases, maybe a thank-you gift from a child she'd once helped. The thought was sweet, if slightly eerie. She placed the doll on her living room mantel and thought little more of it. That night, her cat, an old, gentle tabby named Fig, refused to enter the living room. He sat at the threshold, hissing, his back arched, fur bristling. Over the next few nights, strange things began happening. At exactly 2:59 a.m., Helen would wake up. Always the same time. She wouldn't hear anything. She'd just wake, wide-eyed, sweating, her mouth dry with the metallic taste of fear. The house would be still, but filled with the scent of something unnatural. Burned cloth mixed with iron like rusted nails. She tried rationalizing it, nightmares, old age, maybe the cat knocking things over. But her health began to decline quickly. Her skin grew pale, her hair thinned, her gums bled when she brushed. Doctors ran tests, everything came back normal. Then the real horror started. One morning she found the bathroom mirror smeared in soot. A handprint, small, childlike, smudged across the glass. The windows were locked from the inside. No one else had a key. Another morning, all the faucets in the house were running, scalding hot water, boiling to the touch. She turned them off, but the pipes groaned afterward, as if something still moved inside. And then, one evening, she found the doll seated upright at her dining table, its head tilted slightly, stitched smile unwavering. She hadn't touched it since placing it on the mantel. She threw it out, but the next day it was back, not on the mantel, not on the table, but sitting inside her refrigerator, surrounded by spoiled milk and moldy bread. By then, Helen's rationality was unraveling. She stayed up all night, slept with the lights on, crossed herself before entering rooms. But no matter what she did, the doll kept appearing, always closer. One night, she found it resting gently on her pillow, facing her side of the bed. She burned it in her backyard, doused it in kerosene, and set it ablaze. But the flames bent away from it, as if repelled. The smell turned foul, not just smoke, but something deeper, like curdled milk and rotting flowers. She gagged and dropped it, watching the ground beneath it blacken like burned flesh. The next morning, she received another package, smaller, wrapped in the same paper, this time with a note. One for every life you ruined. Inside were 3 more dolls, each different. One had a stitched tear beneath its eye. Another had arms too long for its body. All were smiling. Helen hadn't thought about it in years, but now it surged back. Maya Green, a 6-year-old girl. Helen had removed her from an abusive home, but the foster placement she'd arranged turned out worse. Maya died 6 months later, accidental injuries. But Helen had known. She had seen signs. She should have intervened. She didn't. She filed the report and moved on. Now someone or something hadn't forgotten. The house turned cold. Salt patterns began appearing under her furniture, chalk circles around her bedposts. In the attic, she found dolls hanging from the beams, dozens of them, all handmade, all smiling. In the center of the attic floor was a photograph, an old one, Helen's childhood photo, pinned down with sewing needles, marigolds circled around it. That night, she began hearing the whispers, not aloud, in her head, voices that didn't speak English, or maybe not any language at all, whispers that scraped like fingernails across the inside of her skull. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Her skin turned gray. She lost track of time. Neighbors noticed her wandering outside at night, barefoot, whispering lullabies no one recognized, holding a doll like a newborn. Sometimes she rocked it. Sometimes she stared at it for hours. Then she vanished. No trace, no noise. Just an empty house and an unbearable smell. 2 weeks later, her next-door neighbors received a parcel. No note. Inside was a single rag doll, smiling, freshly sewn.